Okay, so we'll officially just start recording. This is not super formal if you haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm very
Spontaneity
conversational
is my thing.
indeed. I one thing I should ask, how do I pronounce your last name?
That's well, most people pronounce it Levy, but you can call it. That's just how we pronounce it with the accent that I have. Any way is valid, really.
So you say Levy.
Although I suppose biblically it's
Uh,
Levi, but I'm familiar with Levy.
okay. Yeah, I've been saying it wrong for years, so I apologize.
Doesn't matter. It's
I've
just
been
the idiosyncrasies of English pronunciation.
indeed, and unfortunately, I speak American, so I say things like levee, which is, where I guess they keep water, which is not necessarily as elevated or priestly as your name. So I appreciate that, and I don't know how much you know about Find Your Gods or what that show's about, but it's the perfect kind of dovetailing with a lot of what you do because the show's about mythology. It's
Mhm.
about taking a look at these old stories and looking for meaning and resonance for us today. And it really is just kind of an exploration of those things. I'm not a scholar.
No, that's the same. Well, the same here. I mean, that sounds like in literature what I try and do through music, because 99% of my stuff is original compositions, but for, say, these recreated instruments using these ancient modes and intonations the best I can. But it's like the idea I have is to basically take over where the ancients left off and just to reintroduce some sort of lost spirituality in modern music, which sadly has been lost with commercialism, particularly in the pop world.
Yeah, there's not a lot of it. It's interesting to kind of see different groups. There's a few Greek groups that have are doing some of these things, but no one I think is being as near as I can tell as faithful to some of the ancient forms and ancient instruments as you are. I'm curious, and obviously now we're actually starting to talk. I'm curious for you. Um, and this could go a lot of different directions, obviously, but for you, when did you start to discover some of these ancient forms and ancient instruments for yourself, and how did that idea germinate into what you do now?
It's a strange thing. It goes way back, actually. The whole story goes way back to I was about 14, actually. I just was happened to be in my local record store, and I found this old cassette recording of the late great David Munro, who was like the first person to go about actually recreating ancient music, but well, from not as ancient as I play these days, but like from the medieval era,
Hmm.
and it was like musical time travel. That's the phrase I use quite a lot because the first time I heard it, it's my goodness, I'm actually back. I mean, I was always interested in ancient history and things, but actually hearing the music, it was like you were actually there in some medieval castle, kicking legs over your shoulders. Because that's the thing with music; it's above all the arts, it's the one that directly connects the listener with the intentions of the person who created the music, and that's what I mean. That's why it is to me literally time travel. It's the more direct connection than any other art form. I think that's
Yeah.
what really fascinated me. Um, and this way of completely escaping the modern world through music, that was a revelation. That's the very first time I heard ancient music, and that kind of followed me for decades. But actually creating it myself, purely random. Basically, in 2006, I was looking for some interesting klezmer music. Klezmer is traditional Jewish
Yep.
folk music. And I happened to find this fascinating CD called Music from the Time of Jesus and Jerusalem's Second Temple. And I got the CD, ordered it, and absolutely fascinating. It was from that CD I discovered it was the Levites, my very own Levite ancestors, who actually played the lyres in the Temple of Jerusalem. And
Hmm.
whoa, you couldn't get any more roots music than that. And in the liner notes of the CD, it had a picture of one of the lyres, the modern recreations of the lyres that was used in the recording. And hey presto, I found one on eBay of all places. So I actually got my first lyre off eBay for
Wow.
about 140 of my English pounds. It was just, even though it was a really basic factory-made instrument, the potential was there. I've just found a connection to it. The thing with music, this is something that fascinates me. I've heard music from all over the place, and it's not about the number of notes that are played, but how connected the performer is to the music. Like I've been in acoustic clubs, like folk music clubs, and I've heard middle-class school teachers trying to play the blues. Just doesn't work. They have no connection. They haven't lived the life. Whereas I was lucky enough, one of my biggest musical influences, funny enough, is the late, great B.B. King. I actually got to see him play live way back in 1986. He was 60 at the time. He was doing a tour of the UK. So my first year at university, I got to see him. And that was just a complete revelation. This is the philosophy I have. It's not the number of notes you play, but how you play them and the passion behind it and the connection to the music you're playing. And this was a man who literally couldn't sing as he was playing the guitar because he sang through the guitar. And I've never seen anything like that. And I never have, and I never will. And for decades, I've been trying to find an instrument to play like B.B. King because it's just pure spontaneity. It's improvisation that's just plucked out the air. And through the lyre, I finally found something I could do that with myself. And then, of course, I've got this connection as well to the biblical Levites going back 2,000, nearly 3,000 years.
Yeah.
And so we've got this music, we've got the connection to the instrument and the history, and the rest is history. And yeah, it's been my obsession since 2006 now. And the funny thing is, I find, going back to your thing, name of the sort of podcast, Find Your Gods, so to speak. I'm a firm believer that it's sort of weird metaphysics. If you put out enough energy into the universe, since we are, in essence, energy ourselves, mass is equivalent to energy, the universe does tend to reward us. And literally, from my spare room, I've just put out recording after recording, and just weird things keep happening. The most weird being the telephone conference in my lounge a couple of years ago with Rufus Wainwright. It's just totally surreal.
Yeah.
And there was like the Mars M&M's advert across the whole. And this was a tune I recorded in my spare room. It's absolutely bizarre.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. You put out enough positive energy and the universe rewards you. This is the fascinating thing. And the more I believe this, the more it seems to keep on happening. And really strange.
Well, and I just want to echo that sentiment. You are in good company if you're talking about strange metaphysical things. That's the world I live in, and I agree with you. The in some ways the gratification of making something is reward enough in itself for me personally, but it is so interesting to see how that energy, whether it's a story I've written or something I've recorded, it's interesting to see how those things sort of ripple out and resonate into the world.
Absolutely.
And then bounce back.
And this is an analogy between, obviously, I don't know much about the literary world, but it's the same thing. I've got a blog somewhere on my website, and this is the bitter irony about being a musician. The moment you try and you actually set out to make music for money, then you've robbed the resulting music of its intrinsic worth, because you're not making music for music's sake. You're doing it as a means to an end. And if you do something for a means to an end, it has no intrinsic value. And that's why Justin Bieber sounds so horrendous, for example. Nothing personal against the guy, but I can't stand commercialized music in any way, shape, or form. We've lost the soul of rock and roll, unfortunately, modern times, which is a great tragedy. But but that's the thing. The moment I've kind of accepted this bitter fact, this is when all the things start rolling in, like Rufus Wainwright, the Mars M&M's advert, lots of different things. And another recent phenomenon just happened, just literally out of the blue. Pearson Education in America got in touch with me, and they're using some of my ancient Greek-themed tracks going out to every single high school across the whole of America and maybe part of Canada as well for the next decade. It's
Wow.
absolutely surreal.
Well, that's
So
wonderful.
there's a whole new generation out there. Maybe it's a captive audience because all high school students, but they're going to hear this for the next decade.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful to
Strange.
hear. And that's, uh, there's so many things that you've said that I kind of want to touch on. There's a writer, actually, he lives in Northampton, England, Alan Moore, who is one of my favorite writers, and he's mostly known for writing comic books, but he is sort of a much broader writer, and definitely an English madman in a lot of ways, as he would say. But he, yeah, but he talks about commercialism in very similar ways that you do, and he essentially, and I'm paraphrasing here, says unless you're doing the thing, whether it's music or art or writing, any of the capital A arts, unless you're doing it for its own worth and merit, it isn't going to be ultimately successful at the creative level. You might be satisfied with it, you might make money, you might be famous, but you will have compromised something because
exactly.
a filter has gotten in between you and the capital A art that was given to you to make.
And this is exactly the same analogy, as well as seeing B.B. King play live blues from the soul and seeing some middle-class school teacher play it in an acoustic club somewhere I've been to. It might be note for note perfect, even the same song. But it's that passion, that artistic creativity. It's something you can't even put your finger on it. It's like a hidden spirituality that's actually contained in whatever art form you're trying to create. And if you don't feel it here, then the audience or whoever's listening to it's not going to feel it here or see the greater picture. And this is, you've got to sacrifice quite a lot if you want to be a true artist, be it either in literature, music, or painting or sculpture, anything. You've got to do it. You've got to swallow the hard fact that if you don't do it for its own sake, then what results is not going to be intrinsically valuable. It's just that there's something going to be missing, and the audience will pick up on that. But as soon as you've accepted that bitter pill, then the universe rewards you. It's a really strange thing. It's like talking about find your God. It's like trying to get that lost connection to whatever spirituality. Doesn't matter what religion you are. It's just finding that connection, almost a cosmic connection. As the late great Carl Sagan said, we are literally all made of stardust, and we could be the only means the universe has of the universe being conscious of itself. So let's make the most of it while we're here, because soon matter is going to all end up in black holes evaporating and things. That's another thing I'm really fascinated by. I always want to be a scientist, but could never do the math. So I should try and do the same thing through music. The sort of the themes that fascinate me in astronomy, basically. That's another thing. It's always trying to find that spiritual connection between what I'm creating and the desired result.
Yeah. It's been long enough now, and I don't think it's been a full 10 years, but it might be close. It's been long enough now that when I first found your music, if I recall correctly, it was in an effort to look for ancient music that was authentic, that had an authenticity to it. I didn't want to listen to somebody who had kind of remastered or remixed things. And there's a lot of things out there that I sort of discovered and that had some resonance for me. But as a part of my own devotion and writing, which is invariably often about mythology and the gods, I needed something that could authentically kind of capture the spirit of the things and the gods that I was writing about. And I was grateful and fortunate when I discovered your music, because it was, this is exactly what I was hearing in my head that I needed to sort of accomplish these things. Yeah,
because that was quite early days for me as well. Recording, I think it was about 2012. You last got in touch with me.
Yeah, I think it would have been the Ancient Greek Lyre would have been the first one I found, and then I
Yeah,
immediately, bought every album that I could, Spotified them all, put them on my. I think at that point I had an iPod. We've leveled up to iPhones at this point, but yeah, it was really a kind of a wonderful discovery, and I immediately went to my wife, who is as crazy as I am when it comes to things like mythology and
uh,
sort of this devotional approach to these older gods, and said, "You got to listen to this. This is something special that I, we're lucky to have found it." I want to go back to something a little bit here. You were talking about the early history, and when you were 14 and you heard this kind of the first time you heard historical music. Um, so you're 14 years old. You've bought this cassette. Are you already musically trained? Are you a musician? Where does music start in your life?
that's an interesting thing. I was as a young child, I had no interest in it at all. As I say, I was always interested in the sciences, but sadly I just couldn't do the maths. Um, but yeah, pretty well as I was 11. It was only compulsory at the end of the first year of high school. We had
Yeah.
to do a tune, and I'd never played an instrument before. And funnily enough, I think it was my dad. My dad's not a musician. He taught me how to play by ear. I think it was the tune "Havana Nagila" with one finger on the piano. But
Okay.
just doing that, and even all the notes were wrong with the intervals. The outline of the tune was there. But that got me fascinated. Oh my gosh, this is quite interesting. And then from that, the obsession slowly developed. But I got as far as they call them, A levels here in the UK. I don't know what we call
Yep.
it in the States. But I couldn't get beyond that. The piano was an instrument. I couldn't. I reached a plateau. Um, what put me off so much the piano um, was you have to follow these notes, and it's got to be just like this. If you don't do this, the world will end. You've got to follow the notes. But by doing that, you're taking away your own creativity. You become a note reproducing robot.
Yep.
And that's not the sort of music I'm interested in. And it's took me a long time to get into trying to find something that I really like doing. In fact, it was my dissatisfaction with the piano that got me first interested in teaching myself from scratch without any instructions to play other instruments. Started off with mandolin, that's tuned the same as violin. So then I taught myself to play violin from scratch in my spare room. Um, and then get onto other instruments like banjos and whatever. And just something about string instruments. I don't know. It must be the Levi's roots. I just
Sure.
like string instruments. Never be. I gave up on trying to play the recorder in 1974. I couldn't. I just
No
hate
one
it.
can play the recorder.
Yeah. So yeah, string instruments have always been my thing. But the lyre, what really appeals to me is there's so few notes, yet so much possibilities. And this is the theme actually of my next album in progress, which is just I'm working on at the moment, which I'm going to call New Ancestral Music, Rebirth of the Ancient Lyre. And it's recorded on my 10-string lyre, and the 10 strings are almost analogous to the 10 decades, the maximum lifespan we have on this planet. And although you have only 10 strings, 10 decades maximum, think of what you can do with those. And it's the same with the 10 strings. All the releases I've done with a maximum of 10 strings. And it's incredible. You can create whole vistas of different worlds with 10 strings. And it's the same with the decades of your life. Even if there aren't any gods, we have the creative ability to make our own fate with whatever we've been given us, even if it's just 10 decades.
Yeah.
Like the 10 strings by lyre, there's infinite opportunities, infinite possibilities. All it takes is that creative spark to make the most of it while we're still here.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that idea, and I'm looking forward to the new album. I uh, I'm curious because you mentioned all the different instruments that you've played, and I know you've got albums where you play the lyre, you play the tortoise shell lyre, you play a fiddle, and for you, with the different instruments and kind of qualities of it, um, I have no musical talent, if that has not been apparent yet. I also have no vocabulary to talk about music, but I'm curious about the different ways that you approach an instrument when you're playing it, from violin to fiddle to lyre to ancient lyre. Um, is it is it a complete kind of rewiring of your brain every time you have to pick up an instrument?
Not really. The funny thing is, my academic background is not actually not music, it's philosophy. But philosophy is an amazing tool because you start off with a concept and then you analyze the concept. Like I treat any string instrument as a concept and say, okay, let's see what are the logical limitations and possibilities of this instrument with a given number of strings that it has. And that's how I sort of work things out. Like the lyre, okay, how can you produce a tone on it? Well, there's millions of ways you can produce a tone on it. You can pluck it, you can strum it, um, you can produce harmonics on it. You can find the harmonic point. You can even hit the notes to produce sounds like a hammered dulcimer. And that's the thing, because there's no one telling you you should play it like this, like the piano. Why don't you just play the thing? Just use the instrument, the limitations and possibilities of the instrument as your guide. And that's what I do with the things. And yeah, there's literally no end to what you can do with the thing.
Well, for the listeners who can't see this, but I may post a couple of screenshots. I'm getting to see one of Michael's instruments right now, his lyre, and it is actually a little bit emotional. This is really neat. I'm seeing one of the things that creates the music that I listen to almost every day. This is a real treat. I wanted to ask you about actually what you were just saying. No one can tell you how to play it, and that sort of brings me to one of the things I wanted to ask you about, which was some of the ancient recreations where you're using old music and playing it on historically accurate or comparably accurate instruments. And I'm curious, how do we know what old music sounds like? I assume they don't have the same kind of formalized notation structure. I don't know how you find this music, who discovers it, how it ends up in the hands of a 14-year-old kid. How does the kind of ancient reconstruction that you do work?
Well, as I say, it's in my interest in actual historical fragments is only incidental. My main interest is taking off where the ancients stopped, basically, and carrying on a new tradition, new ancestral music, as I call it, into the modern day. But going back to how I would do that, obviously there are certain fragments of music out there, and they're notated in quite a few different ways. So I have basically a layman's knowledge that I've picked up over the decades of researching how to play these instruments from scratch. For example, going back to ancient Greek music, that ancient Greek music, that's the most unambiguous, because there's lots of theoretical treatises survive about the theory of ancient Greek music. And regarding the notation, they basically use an alphabetical symbol of notation, just like we use A, B, C, D, E, F, G, more or less, to notate the pitch today. And also, about 60 fragments of actual ancient Greek music has survived, funny enough, either on inscribed on marble, like the Delphic hymns, or the Epitaph of Cephalus. They're the most famous pieces of ancient Greek music. There's all those bits on papyri as well. And basically, you have the text of the song, and the musical notation is based on alphabetical symbols, but sometimes the wrong way around. So I'm not a classic scholar. This is just from what I've picked up. And then we have the specific ancient Greek modes as well, which is quite well documented. And confusingly,
what are the Greek modes?
Yeah, the confusing thing is there's like a double terminology. All the original ancient Greek modes were given the wrong Greek names during the early Middle Ages, because I think how the early scholars, they thought that the Greeks were notating the music from what's the word, ascending, whereas is actually descending, so they were given all the wrong names. So just to go through them, basically, using this thing as an example.
Yeah.
The modern major scale that we think of, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, that's basically called the ancient Greek Lydian mode, which is the equivalent interval to C to C. The ancient Greek Phrygian mode, this was misnamed the Dorian mode by the Middle Ages, scholars of the Middle Ages, but the ancient Greek original Dorian mode was D to D. One of my favourite modes, this one, as well as having a minor feel to it, it's also poignant. And this is the thing with these beautiful modes. In modern music, you only have, in the 12-note system, we have major, minor scales. You can only have happy, sad, happy, sad, happy, sad. We've forgotten all the wonderful shades of emotion in between, and these are captured in the characteristics of the ancient Greek modes. Like the Phrygian mode, for example, this tune I did called Ode to Ancient Rome. This was actually the Mars M&M's advert. And it's in this poignant sound because I want to try and evoke what's lost, or when you think of all these lost, the wonders of ancient Rome. And so on. You can hear it's got a poignant thing, kind of a yearning quality to it. You don't get that with a normal minor scale. Now, the next mode up is the equivalent intervals as E to E. And this was Plato's favourite scale. I think he mentions it in the Republic. He says it's the only mode with true moral worth and can even inspire bravery in battle. And this is the ancient Greek Dorian mode. And this was the tune. This is the mode he used in Hymn to Zeus, which Rufus Wainwright used in 2 scenes of his amazing opera Hadrian. So here's a little quote of Hymn to Zeus. And so on. It's a very intense sound. It's very introspective, almost philosophical sounding. You can tell why Plato liked it so much. And then the next mode up, equivalent intervals as F to F. That's called the Hyperlydian mode. And that has an almost dreamy, almost feminine quality to it. I'm just trying to think of a tune that I might have used for this one. I'm trying to. I've got so many recordings, trying to actually remember the actual tune sometimes. This is like, I can't think of one of my own just off the top of my head, but this is actually an ancient Greek fragment, which is in this wonderful, dreamy sounding what's it called? Hyperlydian mode. It's very dreamy, almost sensual sounding. And then the next mode is the Hyper-Phrygian mode, basically the equivalent of G to G on the white notes of the piano. And this has a warm, contented feel to it. And I used this for a tune of mine called Apollo's Lyre.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very contented, warm feel to it. And in fact, it's the same mode that the Beatles used for Norwegian Wood, which is why it sounds why it's such a great song, Norwegian Wood, 'cause it actually feels like you're in front of a fire, because it's a really warm, contented feel that the mode creates. And the next mode up is the equivalent intervals as A to A on the white notes of the piano. This is the, I can remember the correct terminology, the Hyperdorian mode, sometimes called the natural minor scale. I used this in a tune, I think, called, what's it called? Ode to Aphrodite. I think that was actually on that thing called, on a release called The Ancient Lyre that you bought about 10 years ago from now. So again, that's the basis of our modern minor scales. Next mode up from that is the equivalent intervals as B to B, but I've only ever used one tune for that. That's a weird scale. There's basically those 7 modes. That's in ancient Greek music, but then you have the whole things of like Jewish music, which has these wonderful klezmer scales in, which are very exotic sounding, which they use in releases like King David's Lyre, Echoes of Ancient Israel, and Lyre of the Levites, things like that.
Well, that's thank you. That's just, and it's fascinating to watch you play too. And I want to make sure I'm seeing things properly here. So you have your instrument, and there's essentially a front and a back. So your right hand, am I right hand? Yes, your right hand is on the front.
Yeah, basically use either finger plucked or plectrum. In this occasion, I'm using finger plucked. And the beauty of the lyre is you can create 2 completely different sounds at the same time, which you don't get with any other instrument. It's like almost a guitar-like sound.
Is it two-sided?
Yeah, it is. It's like this particular lyre. This is actually made in the States. It's a modern evocation of the biblical kinnor, the 10-string lyre of the Levites.
Okay.
Made by Marini-made harps. This is one of my favourite instruments. Although it's not historically accurate, so to speak, I think it's actually an improvement on ancient instruments. But it captures a lovely, wonderful harp-like timbre that you can do everything that you can on a lyre, which is basically a fusion of playing mandolin, guitar, and harp all in one instrument. You can do tremolos. You can actually strum chords on the thing by this African technique called string blocking, where you block specific strings in your left hand and strum with a plectrum or your fingers of your right hand. So you can play the thing like a guitar.
So your fingers become your fingers have become the frets at that point. You're sort of mimicking the fret. Yeah.
It's the most versatile instrument I've ever tried to think, and even like 13 years down the line, I'm still finding new ways of playing the thing. It absolutely fascinates me what you can do with this. You can actually hit the strings as well. I don't have anything to hit them with at the moment, just find something. Usually I use a little wooden baton. So you can actually hit the strings and create a sound like a hammered dulcimer. As well. The only limit is your imagination and creativity. That's the thing I love about the thing. So few strings, analogous to so few decades in our lives. That's what can we do with the decades? We can do anything we choose and create wonderful things. And it's all, even Plato himself, I think it was in the Republic, the Plato Socrates, somebody or other, describes a well-ordered society like a well-tuned lyre. Each string has a different timbre, but together they form a wonderful harmony and act as one.
Yeah, so there's an aspirational quality to it as well of bringing all these things together, which of course in the Republic would make sense. It's interesting to watch you play it too, because you mentioned harp, and of course kind of that, for the listeners at home, I'm holding my hands up in a very evocative way. The kind of two-sided plucking and strumming. And I don't know much about music or harp music, but I am a fan of the Marx Brothers, and so I've seen a lot of Harpo playing the harp, which he did quite well, but he was
Hmm.
self-taught. And it
Yeah.
occurred to me while you were playing and talking about striking the notes, and I'm going back to something you said about the piano, where it was too formalistic, or kind of there was kind of a form imposed that you had to follow, and this is a much more freer or fluid kind of motion. And what's interesting in my head, at least, and this may be wrong historically or technically, the piano is a stringed instrument, but there's an interface in between the artist and the strings, meaning that keyboard. And
Hmm.
and with you and the harp or the lyre, there is no interface. You have direct connection to the source of the music. And I'm just,
Absolutely.
yeah, sorry. It's just, I'm wondering if that, personally, if you feel, as you're playing, as you're composing, if you are thinking about things formally, or is it improvisational and organic, like jazz or the blues, where you sort of discover things?
For me, again, as I said, I'm self-taught, and every instrument I love playing as a reaction against this formal education system that I suffered when I was doing like A-level music. Um, when I actually compose music, I throw out all the instruction manual. What I do now, what I find works best, is just literally to record, just to literally pluck tunes out of the air. Just let the creative experience happen. Record what I'm doing, listen back to it, and if there's some really interesting melodic ideas there, then learn it from the improvisation. So basically, I'm literally learning from the gods who inspired me. So it's just literally plucking the tunes out the air, tunes which never existed before, but not a complete freeform improvisation. It's then using those free improvisations, listening back to it, using some evaluation, and then relearning basically the improvisation and adding bits that I might want to add.
Sure.
The actual germination is completely organic, and that's what I like best. And all the best tunes I've ever come up with have been like that. I could do it right now. I could do it literally right now without even thinking about it. Okay, this has never happened before. I'm just going to pluck an interval and see what the hell happens. Oh, this is really nice. This is a fifth, which was Plato's favorite interval. And then we're just going to do that, and then we're going to see what happens. That's quite a nice phrase. Let's do it again. And so on. Simple as that. Just basically, just forget about the rule book. And hey, presto, there's a tune that never existed before. And I was recording that, so I'd listen back to that and think, that's quite nice, like that phrase. Or I could add a B section. The beauty is the simplicity. And another analogy, for example, some people really like listening to Paganini. Oh, no thanks. I'd rather listen to my own migraine. I'd much rather go to an Irish bar somewhere over in Ireland, listen to some guy who's completely sloshed on Guinness, play some wonderful folk music he's played on the fiddle for the last 60 odd years, because he plays it from the soul. And going way back to the analogy you keep coming up with, like the BB King gig, it's not the number of notes you play, it's how you play them and the connection you have to the music. And I detest listening to music played by people who have no connection to it. Like going back to the folk clubs, you have middle class school teachers singing the blues. What do they know about hard life? They have the big salaries, they have the 5 holidays abroad. I'm sorry, it doesn't matter. Even if all the notes are right, they're not going to play it with soul because they haven't lived the life. There's no connection to the music they're doing. So that's always going to miss that elusive connection to the gods that we keep talking about.
So for you, when you're playing, and this may be too personal, if I can back off of this, if you'd prefer not to delve, what is your connection? Where do you feel it? What does it do for you when you're playing?
It's an interesting thing that because the initial connection was like sort of roots music. Think, oh my gosh, it was the Levites who actually used to play the lyres. What a family tradition to carry on into the 21st century. But of course, I'm not going to play, but I'm not going to limit myself just by playing songs from the Levite Jewish tradition. Oh yeah, yes, I started off doing that with things like King David's Lyre, Echoes of Ancient Israel, and whatever have you. But in doing that, in that creative process of just adapting, actually, how I did those, I first of all adapted just tunes I knew from the Jewish klezmer repertoire. That's the traditional instrumental repertoire, and arranging it for the 10 strings of the modern evocation of the kinnor. And that fascinated me. It's the actual creative process of doing that, which then I became connected to the instruments. Before I didn't have the connection with the instruments. But that was how I taught myself to play the instruments, by basically adapting tunes I used to know. I used to play a bit of klezmer fiddle. That's again, that's self-taught as well. I love music with a connection. And this was like, I say, klezmer is the traditional Jewish music of the old shtetls in Eastern Europe.
Oh
So I
yeah.
basically transferred that skill that I had to the biblical kinnor. And funny enough, the symmetry is amazing, because in modern Hebrew, kinnor means violin. And here I am connecting it back to the original kinnor, the original Hebrew word, which meant the lyre of the Levites.
Wow.
So that's, again, this fascinating connection going
Yeah.
down the millennium, which, and that's how I taught myself to play the lyre, actually by creating King David's Lyre, Echoes of Ancient Israel. So transferring, now that I have this intimate connection with the instrument, and realizing how you create tunes or how you arrange things on it. And then it was only then that I found the ability, from literally out of nowhere, to create these tunes. And I've always tried to create music. I tried it on the piano when I was 17. I came up with one tune. I just can't stop. It's like the more tunes I come up with, like I created a tune that didn't exist before. They asked me to try and play it again because I didn't record it. But if I listened to it, I could maybe develop it and change it and start a new album from it. But yeah, it's just that connection with the instrument. I've never had that connection before. It's a very intimate connection physically as well, because the instrument's right next to you. You've got direct connection to the strings. It's not like a harp, you've got billions and millions of nicely color-coded strings to find the things. You've got a very limited number of strings, but infinite possibilities, and that's what fascinates me.
Well, first of all, I'm delighted that you created something new here during this conversation. I feel very privileged to have been a part of that, observing it happen. That's very special. To me personally, I wanted to ask you about the quality of the music, and I'm speaking mainly about the Greek and Roman recordings that you've done. Although I think there's elements of them in the Egyptian ones as well. And actually, kind of throughout it, maybe a quality of the instruments themselves. There's a thoughtfulness to the music in a way that I find utterly unique in music. I listen to a lot of different kinds of music. There's almost no kind of music I won't listen to, except, really kind of speed death metal type things just aren't my cup of tea. But but I listen to a wide range of things, from popular music to classical music to, strange people I find. Not that you're strange, but you are in the ecosystem of things that I listen to a great deal. And there's a halting, thoughtful quality to so many of the compositions, where you have these notes being played, and it is almost like steps, and then that quick trill or run, and then they sort of reconvene again into the steps, and they have a progression to them, but it for me personally, and I'm imposing on you my own reactions to things. I realize, for me personally, it evokes the same kind of halting steps that we take towards our own understanding of anything, whether it's understanding of God or a God or the gods, or just our own tentative steps towards anything new, and then that enthusiasm where things start to respond to our inquiry, and we get that rush of extra notes or extra energy that comes out of it. And it's something that I love about your music because, again, it's unique. I've only heard it from you, or in some cases, uh, 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 musicians who are doing similar things, but similar is not the same. As I said, I think there's a unique quality there that I really, really value. And I'm curious, because there is actually a question here. I'm curious um, if that kind of progression and the space in between those notes, if that's something that's part of a notation or a meter from the different modes, or if that's something that you've just brought to it yourself.
Sorry, just hold me a second. There's supposed to be a delivery at the door. I won't be a minute.
No problem, no problem.
I've just got to answer the door. See, this is the spontaneous,
Yes.
unplanned world we live in.
So you got my flowers.
There's nothing that exotic.
Okay.
Sorry, what was I lost my train of thought then.
No, that's all right. I was just talking about kind of the kind of progression and meter of the music that you play, particularly in those ancient constructions. And I'm just curious if that sort of halting quality is a component of the mode itself, or if those things are documented and passed down, or if there's interpretation on your part where you're bringing your own kind of rhythm or meter to the music.
I think most of the time, I don't write from any dots. I hate dots or set rhythms. Why should we have set rhythms? The tunes I do, I don't think of rhythm. I just do it completely organic. If there's going to be a pause, enjoy the pause, then go on to the next bit. Again, there might be a pause, or I might get very excited with what I'm doing. There's going to be a shorter pause.
Yeah.
Why should we have music that's regimented? You've got to fit it into a time signature. And the ancient Greeks were the same. They didn't have time signatures. They just had their music perfectly fitted into the meter of the actual songs it originally accompanied. And that's the best way you can write a song. Although my music doesn't really have words, it's the same principle. I don't think of set rhythms. I think of, this is really nice. I like this interval. Let's leave a pause here, and so on. But again, I don't plan it like that. It's just as I'm thinking of a tune, it'll just happen automatically usually. All depends on how connected you are to the tunes.
Yep. You mentioned words, and I know that there are, as you said, fragments of ancient Greek or Roman music where we do have some words, the epigraph, being one of the famous ones, I think. And I'm also just curious because I believe it's on one of your latter albums, if not your most recent one, where there are vocalizations that have been added, which I think is a new thing for you.
Yes, that was the purpose of that. I think the one you're referring to, one I experimented doing that with most was something called the ancient Greek Kithara of classical antiquity. This was a wonderful, and this is I've been collaborating with a company in Greece called Lutherios for about four years now. And again, this is the universe rewarding me, and they really randomly contacted me by email about 4 years ago, and basically I had the honor of them sending over these beautifully reconstructions of these very authentically recreated ancient Greek instruments, kithara, tortoiseshell lyres,
Wow.
and things like that, and for free, just so I promote them on my YouTube channel. Amazing. Um, Sorry, what was the
Vocalization?
vocalizations? Yeah. So yeah, in this particular album, I was trying to demonstrate how it's possible to just like how the kithara was literally the guitar of ancient Greece. Because if you look at ancient Greek vases, this is the instrument that's depicted most. And it was like the instrument of the professional musicians of ancient Greece, just like the guitar is the instrument of the popular rock singer of modern times. And yeah, I was just demonstrating very simply because I'm not a trained, I have no confidence in my singing ability whatsoever. I'm just doing very simple vocal lines, but showing how you can accompany the vocal line and also use the same instrument. There's only 9 strings on this particular instrument that I had. I can do chords, solos, and accompany the voice just with 9 strings. And back in ancient Greece, the standard number was 7 strings, so you managed to do it with just 7 strings. It's incredible.
Was there, and you may not know the answer to this, I know I sure don't, and I may end up Googling it. Was there any inherent symbolism or meaning behind 7 strings in ancient Greece? Did
Yeah,
it
there is. That's the
correspond to
fascinating thing.
gods or, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's all and that, and the same with the Hebrew music as well. It's going back to ancient Greece. The god Apollo was apparently born on the 7th day of the 7th month.
Yep.
Of course, Apollo became the god of music thanks to his brother Hermes flogging him a tortoiseshell lyre to compensate for stealing all his cattle. And hence, yeah. So that's what that symbolizes, the god Apollo being born on the 7th day of the 7th month. The Hebrew lyres are fascinating. It's like one of the very early examples of Kabbalah, the spiritual connection between words and literature.
Yep.
And we know that the biblical kinnor, the lyre played by the Levites, had 10 strings by both in the biblical text and also through Flavius Josephus, a 1st century Jewish historian who actually witnessed the Levites play these lyres in the Temple of Jerusalem. But had 10 strings, and another type of lyre, which was presumably a bass lyre, had 12 strings. This is fascinating. 10 strings, think of the 10 Commandments.
Yep.
12 strings, think of the 12 tribes of Israel. 10, and the total number of tones, that's 10 strings plus 12 is 22, which is the number of letters in the Hebrew alphabet.
Yep.
I mean, there's got to be some underlying spirituality there, because again, in Hebrew, each alphabetical symbol also has a numeric value as well. And since going back to Kabbalah, since if you go back to spiritual ancient Judaism, since they literally believed that the universe came about by the word of God, and they thought the word of God was spoken in Hebrew, then the letters of the alphabet are literally the building blocks of the universe, if you want to really take it back. And that's symbolized in the number of lyre strings. How amazing is that?
I love those kind of alignments of a little bit of mysticism, a little bit of musical theory, a little bit of history. There's even a little bit of science in there. I love how those things all come together.
I mean, talking the science, superstrings that make up the weird quantum physics, that make up the weird nature of reality. The whole of the universe is a vibration. The whole of the music, the whole of the universe, be there a god or no gods, is a vibration of energy. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. I was thinking of string theory when we first started the conversation. And I am not many things. I am not a scholar. I'm not a historian. I'm also not a physicist, but I've read enough to think I can talk about it in a comic book level. And so, yeah, I was thinking about string theory, and I was thinking about the vibration, and the idea that everything has a frequency, an inherent frequency to it on some level or other that can be measured, alive or dead, is always fascinating. These inert forms, or what we would consider to be inert forms, like a piece of quartz, actually has a vibration, has a frequency to it, and
Yeah,
the connection of these things is always fascinating to me.
I mean, even going back to ancient Greek cosmology, the music of the spheres, they literally thought that the actual heavens, or as they perceived them, the spheres, the planets, had a music of their own, and the resonance of them created an inaudible music that was echoed in the actual physical music that we played, and that things like that. It really fascinates me, and that's that really spiritual, deep connection which has been lost in modern commercial music. And I want to try and dig back to get this thing that's been lost. I'm going back to the ancient Greek philosophers. I can't pronounce his name. Pyro, one of the skeptics. The only one. Goes back to my new album in progress, which is about existential anxiety. We might be here. There might not be there might not be gods. We might all be here thanks to a random quantum fluctuation. But my goodness,
Sure.
live the moment. It's amazing. And like Pyro said, the only way to achieve is it called atraxia? Atraxia? I can't pronounce it. The Greek word, which means inner peace, is to realize the only thing we can know for certain is uncertainty. And once you can live with that, once you can live with that fact, then you can sit back and appreciate the mystery. Yes, explore the wonders of the universe. Yes, do maths. Yes, do physics. Yes, do astronomy, cosmology, physics, whatever. But always realize you're never going to achieve complete satisfaction unless you know it's great to do this because we can, because we're here. But you must sit back and appreciate the mystery of it all, because even modern physicists don't actually understand quantum physics. Why should things pop out into existence from nothing? It's like the tunes I'm playing, they pop out. I want to do an analogy with quantum physics. Let's pluck a tune that never existed before because there's the possibility of creating it. Why not?
Yeah.
Let music be an analogy to our very existence.
Well, and
Even if they're instant to God or gods.
sure.
It's a miracle we're here.
And it's really a sort of a choice that people make, right? We choose to believe or not to believe. We choose to find these things or not find them, or we choose to create them. And it really it's framed by our experiences, what we choose and how we choose to interpret it. When I write, I don't write very formally, and I don't write with a intent in mind. I have a loose collection of maybe an event or a character or whatever, but I just follow what that character is doing. I don't outline things ahead of time. I don't try to plan it. Whenever I've tried to plan something in one of my books, the character is often working against me. And I've sort of learned over time to let the story just tell itself and be the one who is putting it out there.
Yeah, the exact analogy I have with my own music creations. The moment you start trying to be regimented and write the notes down, you must do this, and you can't have parallel fifths and all this harmonic nonsense that was taught at school. That is going to stifle your creativity. You must go with the flow and let the tunes create themselves. And that's a miracle. That's a modern day miracle that you can still do. Music is the only magic we have, because you just literally conjure tunes out of the air. It's fascinating. One of the most amazing opportunities to recreate this in real time was last year. Out of the blue, I had an email from the Faculty of Classics at the University of Oxford, of all places, as part of the celebration, the Festival of Latin and Greek, the European Festival of Latin and Greek. We're going to do translations of Ovid's Metamorphosis or something. I mean, I'm not a classic scholar, I know very little about it, so with no rehearsal, no nothing, it invited me to come over there and literally pluck tunes out the air as all these boffins, world-renowned experts. It was terrifying. We're going to do these in-depth translations of Ovid. So there was no sound check, no rehearsal. Let's just play the music, and that's what I somehow did. That was a real learning curve for me. If I had any anxiety about performance, that's gone now. Just literally forget about the rules, just play the instrument and go with the flow. I'd never even heard of it. It was a really interesting experience.
It's fascinating because Ovid's Metamorphoses is I have it right here. It's a
Yeah,
it's
small
a
worlds.
text I refer to quite a bit, and I was
Yeah.
in my former, or not former life, but in a previous kind of part of my life, I was an actor in a theater company, and we
Hmm.
did a staged production of Ovid's Metamorphoses, but we did not have a script. We didn't have a text. We took each one of us. I think there were about 7 of us in the cast. We each picked a story out of it. And then through collaboration and improvisation, we built uh, scenes based on each one of the stories, and then found ways to connect those. So it was literally plucking them out of the air, just like this same process you're talking about. And so it's fascinating to hear, Ovid's work. Which he's a Roman writer who is sort of
Uh-huh.
collecting all of these old stories. He's also adding his own stories, which is really interesting. Some of the stories in Ovid, they can't necessarily trace to previous sources. And there are some people,
All right.
myself included, who think he was adding to the canon with some of these real
Yeah. Yeah.
fundamental texts that we take for granted now, or at least people like I do. And I don't know, it's fascinating. I wanted to go back to something, but before I do, I want to do a time check and make sure you're okay to chat a little bit further.
Oh no, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm
Sure.
fine at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I could talk to you for hours, and honestly, I suspect if it's all right with you, perhaps in a few months we could do another conversation and then put it on the show again as sort of a follow-up, because particularly if you have a new album coming out, we could help promote it a little bit. I would
Absolutely. That's
certainly be up
cool.
for that, and we could dig into some of these other things. But you mentioned the music of the spheres. Um, and I'm like you, not a maths person, not a science person, but I have a love of astronomy and space exploration. Obviously, with the American Institute, NASA, there are a lot of sort of echoes of mythology and how they name their missions and how we've named the planets over the
Hmm.
years. And I'm curious if you've ever heard any of the recordings that have been made by NASA when, like the Voyager probes or a few of the others have gone past some of the planets in the solar system.
Hmm.
They have picked up the ambient sound that comes from them. And there are recordings of this that you can listen to on Spotify, for instance.
I don't know.
Okay.
I didn't come across. I must look at that. That's
Yeah. No,
literally music of the spheres. That's fascinating.
it's one of my mild obsessions. I have a few that are,
Yeah.
kind of soundscape obsessions, and that's one of them. And it kind of ties into something else music related, um, with the Voyager probes, Voyager 1 and Voyager
Hmm.
2, which are very near and dear to my heart, in no small part because these probes were sent out with a golden record. And this is part of the Carl
Hmm.
Sagan influence in the world that we're all, or at least I am very, very grateful for. But this golden record was essentially a greeting to whoever might end up finding these uh, 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 probes still going.
Hmm.
They've left our solar system at this point, and
So
gone into the
that's
broad
the
universe.
heliosphere. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
fascinating.
yeah,
We've literally become an interstellar species. It's amazing. Time to
yeah.
be alive.
And we put on these records um, the best of ourselves as human beings that we could at the time. So it's
Hmm.
music. Um, uh, I I I I want to say it's BB King, but it may be Muddy Waters.
Chuck Berry
Um,
was on there. Chuck Berry was definitely on there. I remember.
yes, yes, absolutely. Chuck Berry's on there. Glenn Gould playing from the Goldberg Variations is on there. We have the Children of the World saying hello. We have the recording of a
Hmm.
woman's heartbeat as she's nursing her newborn child. We have, the sound of someone's brainwaves as they're falling in love. Um, and all of this sound from us is being given out to the universe as a uh, sort of a signature of this is who we are and this is what we're about.
Mm.
And music is a component of that. And I've always loved it, this idea of that, and just the fact that it exists in the world, that these two things are going in opposite directions, carrying this in a way, sort of collaborating with that larger music of the spheres. I don't have a question. It was just you said it, so I thought I'd talk too much. However,
Yeah.
it does kind of connect to one of your more recent albums, where you take your music and you do kind of provide sort of a cosmic framework for it. Where it's no longer terrestrial, but you've sort of translated it or shaped it in a way so that it has kind of a broader, again, cosmic resonance. And I'm
Yeah.
curious where that came from, why you had that idea.
Yeah, I think the recording you're talking about is something my most experimental thing to date called Ascension of the Lyre. The title of that is actually a pun on Orpheus ascending from the underworld, but also the ascension of the lyre, literally from an ancient instrument to an instrument we could use in our distant future. Like yourself, I'm absolutely fascinated by our progress into the stars, and especially with things going on with SpaceX at the moment, and Elon Musk wanting to literally start a colony on Mars, hopefully within my lifetime even. And this inspired me okay, my goodness, my music could be one of the soundtracks to the new national anthem on Mars or something, who knows? And this inspired me to do literally my own sort of image of little snapshots of the solar system, my musical version of the Voyager expedition. So
Yep.
basically, in this one, I'm trying to capture through music. It's actually inspired by Spock's Vulcan harp.
Oh,
A bit of
okay,
a trick
sure.
on my, because Spock's Vulcan harp is literally a lyre. It has a bridge like a lyre. So yeah, use all these weird effects, and some of the tracks try and evoke different themes from the solar system, like methane, like lakes of Titan, that's the moon of Saturn, where they
Mhm.
found seas of methane and things like this. And yeah, that's my most experimental thing, literally trying to ascend the lyre from a forgotten instrument into a vibrant instrument that can be used for maybe when we're on Mars sometime. We might be playing the lyres, why not? The lyre was the first instrument. We've used the first guitar of ancient times. It could be the guitar of future times, like Spock's Vulcan harp. That's the idea I had in that very ultra experimental little release I did.
Yeah, oh, that's fascinating. And I had not thought about Spock, but I know exactly what you're talking about now. And I'm again, something else I'm going to have to go and Google later. I wonder who had the idea for that. I don't know that Leonard Nimoy was a musician. I know he was a photographer, but
Mhm.
he did record some albums. He did sing, and I'm wondering if he had any musical background, and if he brought that to the character, or if it came about of that. Also, he was Jewish, and so he has some heritage and connection potentially to some of the same things that you've described. And was there, again, sort of this generational resonance, where now we have Spock and you and others, expanding out into the stars, which is a kind of exodus. It occurs to
It
me.
is. The analogies are fascinating. Yeah,
Yeah.
literally. A story from like the times of the original Levites. Moses was a Levite. Yeah, to 21st century and into the not so distant future now, when we're actually going to be living on Mars. Or if I find Elon Musk the most inspirational person of the 21st century. Amazing guy. Yeah. So what the thing is, like in ancient times, there was no distinction between boxing, different disciplines. It was all one discipline. It was all philosophy, and it should be in modern times. Music is philosophy, science is philosophy, because they're all doing the same thing. It's taking human consciousness and expanding it into the universe, into which we're magically for a brief time a part of, and
Yeah.
that's a miracle. And it doesn't matter if there's a God, it doesn't matter if there's gods or no gods. We're here. My goodness, that's amazing. That's a miracle. Live the moment. It's absolutely amazing. And do what I do through music, create things that didn't exist before, inspire other people by what you do. From your spare room, that's what I do. I mean, I do 3 part-time jobs and I play the lyre. If it wasn't for the internet, no one would know it existed. It's embrace the modern times, but also embrace where you came from,
Yeah.
ancient times and your own lineage. And yeah, that's what I aim to try and do. And it's great to have feedback from yourself, from the other side of the Atlantic, that things I'm doing in my spare room are making a difference in the fabric of the space-time continuum.
They are, I don't want to understate it. When I said it's part of the soundtrack of my life, I'm not kidding. I'm so grateful to you for the music that you make and have made. I I I genuinely appreciate it for the musical value of it, but also for the emotional connection that it gives me to the music itself. And I'm delighted to have been able to talk with you today. I have to tell you, I want to talk to you more and talk to you again. So let's definitely keep in touch. But for the listeners, how do people learn more about you and your music? Where can they find you on social media and on the web?
Well, my website is www.ancientlyre.com. But just Google search Michael Levy, Levy, Lyre, Lyre, and I'll pop up about 1 billion times.
Yeah.
But my music's on all the usual digital music platforms, iTunes, Apple Music, every single Amazon Echo thing.
Yep.
You can find my stuff on Amazon, streaming from there. Basically, any digital music site, you're going to find me, and anything to do with my sort of all the blogs and the historical research that I've pieced together, and my philosophical insights that I've developed will all be on my website. There's a historical research section, got a blog section. So I've been running my website for a decade now. So like my music, it's something I've just put together organically and edited from, and it's just an ongoing project of mine, which incidentally sort of points people in the right direction where they can purchase my music or indeed license my music, like the Mars Eminence advert did. Because yeah, I do 3 part-time jobs. So anyone who wants to use my music, it is available to license for any project at all. Thankfully, and there's a little page on my website which says how you can license any track from any of my albums. So yeah, if you're interested in doing that, no matter what the project, please do so. And that'll get the more. Also, I've got my Patreon page link as well on my website. Patreon hasn't really, it's something I've done recently, but I really don't have many followers. It's a very niche thing to do. But if someone wants to support my musical mission, please do. Just $1 a month would be invaluable in my mission to recapture the ancient magic of Apollo himself, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. What is your website address?
www.ancientlyre.com. That lyre spelled Lyre.
Yes, Ancient Lyre, Liar, is probably something different.
Ly, yeah, it's Ly, yeah, Lyre.
Yes.
And ironically, I think it's a corruption. Actual the way we pronounce it is a corruption of the original pronunciation from the Greek, which was lyra.
Ah.
But, so yeah, it's got sort of mistranslated and mispronounced lyre, Lyre, in English American speak.
Okay. This is wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And just to give you a little bit of context for what comes next, typically I have to go through and sort of clean up audio and fix levels and things as much as I can. And then it just becomes part of one of my episodes. Right now, I'm in the midst of working on an episode actually about Apollo, one of the Apollo stories, and one of the Diana stories. So once that episode goes up, which honestly would probably be in the next couple of weeks, then I'll follow it up with this interview. And I'll certainly keep you in touch as that's coming on, so that you're aware of it and can listen to it. And again, if you want access to these original recordings, I can put them online so that you can download them.
That'd be really, yeah. I mean, great to share it on maybe a social media or a website blog, if that's all right with you, TM.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Because things like this are really good. It helps sort of focus. Have such rare opportunities to talk in depth to somebody who appreciates what I do, because we're not recording now, are we? My wife's not a musician, so she doesn't really get what I do. It's like someone who comes from a different artistic background can appreciate it from a different angle.
Yeah.
And it really helps focus and clarify my thoughts by having conversations like this. And feedback is invaluable. That's something I'm doing here from my spare room is having a profound effect on authors living in America. It's cool. I love this. This is the random quantum nature of existence, which I find so fascinating.
Well, it's yeah, and I could just keep saying it all over and over and over again. But yeah, the effect is there, and I'm grateful for it. I can't wait to see what comes next, and I'm really looking forward to continuing this conversation, not just for the show, but I'm glad that there's so much common ground in just how we understand the world and the universe and the ways that we interact with each other and with our art. It's gratifying for me to sort of say, "Oh, okay, I'm not alone," and that's really
I like that. I love that.
special.
And the analogies you mentioned, especially your own creative process, I find it fascinating. Yeah, why do we have this distinction of the arts and things? Surely we should just have one thing called human consciousness, and we are just little facets of that, and we should preserve it. And for whatever, it might not be here forever, and so that's why it's even more precious. And let's carry on doing what we do best.
Yes,
and
indeed.
Don't do it for money. Anything financial, let it just be something incidental, because then we're no better than the animals. We've got to elevate ourselves, like the analogy of, again, the ascension of the Lyre, the ascension of Orpheus from the underworld. We must ascend on our upward journey into spirituality, almost to the gods.
Almost.
Thank you, Tian.
Thank you, Michael. This has been a delight for me. Well, I've already said it, but I genuinely, this didn't just make my day. I pity my poor wife. When she gets home from work, she's going to have to hear about all of this. And I'm going to say, well, you can't listen to the episode for a while, honey. But boy, is it neat. So thank you so much. I've just loved it. It's been a delight.
Thanks, Tian. Keep us updated, and I can't wait to hear your edited version and anything you'd like.